Born in the Philippines in 1929, Teresita Basa was the only child of a very successful lawyer, so it's needless to say that she had a very privileged and comfortable life. Teresita Basa was interested in music, and in the 1960s she moved to the US to study it. After she got her master's degree in music, Teresita Basa wanted to do something more with her life, specifically to help people. So she decided to study inhalation therapy, and that's how she ended up in the medical field as a respiratory therapist in the Edgewater Hospital in Chicago. She was known to be very quiet and had a very sweet nature. All of her patients loved her, and that's why she'd be the last person you'd think of to be a victim of a violent crime. It was the 21st of February, 1977, and Teresita just got home from work. She decided to give her friend a phone call just to see how her day was and generally have a little chat. That phone call happened at 7:30 p.m. and lasted for half an hour. During this phone call, Basa mentions to her friend that she's expecting a male guest to visit later that evening, but never gives her his name. About an hour later, Teresita's neighbors become increasingly alarmed as they smell smoke coming from her apartment. Around 9 p.m., the fire department was called to put out a fire in Teresita's apartment. As the firemen entered Teresita's home, a gruesome sight greeted their eyes. Teresita's mattress was on fire, and underneath it was her nude body. But that wasn't everything. She had a knife sticking out of her chest. The weird thing was, her clothes were neatly folded beside her. This implied a sexual assault, but an autopsy later determined that no such thing had taken place. Detectives Joseph Sachula and Lee R. Eplin were assigned to Basa's case, and they started interviewing her friends and acquaintances to find out more about Teresita's character. While investigating her apartment, they found a note on the dresser that read, "Get tickets for AS," but they didn't manage to find out who AS was, so the case hit a wall.
The only real piece of evidence we found was a memo indicating that she was expecting to obtain some theater tickets for a subject by name of AS, who might have been expected at the apartment on that night.
In August, about 5 months later, Detective Joe gets a call from the police department about a possible lead on Basa's case, involving a person called Allan Showery. The Evanston police sent Detective Joe to speak to Dr. Juan Chua and his wife Remy Chua. This is where the case took a bizarre turn. Remy Chua was Teresita's friend, and she mentioned that she, Allan, and Teresita worked briefly together at Edgewater Hospital. Her husband, Dr. Juan Chua, was a well-respected surgeon and wasn't someone that would typically believe in the paranormal. But what happened with Teresita's case could have changed his mind forever. It was a regular day in the Chua household when Remy went into a comatose state and began speaking in the voice of another woman. The voice identified itself as being Teresita Basa, Remy's friend, and proceeded to claim that she was stabbed to death by no other than Allan Showery, A.S., the initials from the note. Dumbfounded, Dr. Juan asked the voice why she would let Allan into her home, to which Teresita replied that he was her friend. After the trance state of Remy Chua, she would remember nothing and wouldn't even remember the words she spoke as Teresita Basa. At first, the Chuas really did not want to contact the police. They didn't want to come off as foolish, and as a surgeon, Dr. Juan did not want to lose his respectability. They only contacted the police after these trance-like states kept happening to Remy Chua. Naturally, the police didn't take this report seriously at all at first, but then Dr. Juan claimed that the voice of Teresita Basa told him that not only had Allan murdered her, but he also stole some jewelry out of her home and gave it to his wife. This was a detail that not even the police knew about, and seeing how Allan had the same initials as the note left at Teresita's apartment, it was worth paying him a visit.
It was a funny situation. Being a policeman, you can tell when somebody's sincere and when they firmly believe they're giving you good information. I could tell it that he believed what he was telling me was the truth.
On the 11th of August, Joe visits Allan's apartment, and at first he completely denies ever being in Teresita's home. But shortly after, Allan changes his story and claims that he only entered her apartment to fix her TV. While talking to Allan, Detective Joe manages to notice something on Allan's wife's hand. A pearl cocktail ring, and its description matched the one that Teresita Basa's voice gave. But this wasn't the only jewelry he found. He managed to find all of the stolen jewelry that Teresita Basa's voice reported. The jewelry was identified by Basa's family afterwards. Allan Showery later confessed to the murder of Teresita Basa and claimed that he only planned to rob her so he could pay his rent. He managed to steal about $30 and a handful of jewelry. However, Allan changed his story in court and claimed that his confession was just a joke and that he was only kidding. Allan's attorney claimed that Ms. Chua had faked her trances due to being fired by the hospital, and the first trial was decided to be a mistrial, so a second one was scheduled for February 1979. Back at his cell, Allan had a change of heart yet again and pled guilty for murder. People speculated that he was visited by the ghost of Teresita Basa, but what most likely happened is that his attorney made him plead guilty so he'd get a reduced sentence, and that he did. Showery was paroled from Stateville Correctional Center after only serving 5 years. Detective Joe claims that to this day he is unsure of how... What are you doing? Detective Joe claims that to this day, he is unsure of how the information about Teresita Basa's murder was obtained. But everything her spirit has relied through Remy Chua had turned out to be completely true, thus concluding the most bizarre murder case in Chicago history.
To this day, I'm not quite sure if Teresita came back. It's one of those bizarre incidents that you don't know is true or not true.
That's it for today's video, and if you enjoyed it and weirdness is your cup of tea, coffee, or whatever beverage you prefer, then click the like and subscribe button and do leave a comment to appease the algorithm gods. Thank you again for watching, and goodbye, Darklings.